Hi kids, how you doing? Today we are going to be having a look at the model samples and creating some complex drum beats with it. Something that model samples is quite suited to. There's two knobs on it which control the decay parameter and the chance parameter, and using both of these with a drum loop or break you can make some really quite complicated loops. Let me show you how it goes. Before I start on the model samples, I'm just going to explain a few things. One of the reasons why I like to use natural drum loops is because drummers tend to play things that you don't program, so it sounds a lot more fluid and there's more variation and the drum beats are generally more interesting. We can use them to make something which is even more complex than a natural drum loop and sounds even more interesting. So one of the things you need to understand about the model samples is the way that the sample start works. So the sample start parameter has 120 slots. So you can choose one of 120 start points for a sample. So if you've got a 1-bar loop, what this means, assuming that it's a 4/4 drum loop, the beat 1, which is usually the kick drum at the start, that you want to put on step 1 is going to come on 0 for the sample start parameter. And then the snare drum, which usually comes on beat 2, is going to be sample start on 30, and beat 3, which is usually another kick drum but it might not be, is on sample start 60, and then beat 4, which is almost always another snare drum, is on sample start 90. And knowing this, it makes it much easier to scale through and find each one of those beats. On the samples, load in a whole complete loop and then tell it when to start it at different times. And if you tell it to start it at different points in that drum loop, you can in effect chop it up. But one of the bonuses is that you can also leave the tail hanging on. If you leave stuff hanging over, it creates a more complex pattern. Consequently, if you're looking at a 2-bar loop, beat 1, that's step 1, that's going to be 0. But when you get to beat 2, because the whole sample is twice as long, beat 2 or step 5 is going to be sample start 15. And beat 3 or step 9 is going to be sample start 30, and beat 4 will be sample start 45, and so forth. So with all that in mind, I think it's time we turn to the samples. I've already loaded up a 2-bar loop on there, and knowing what we now know, I will show you how we can program a beat using those sample starts to effectively slice the sample up, and how we can make a much more interesting complex rhythm using the decay and the chance parameter. So let's go over to the samples. Yep, hear that? 1 2 3 4 2 2 3 4. Okay, so let's start programming. We're going to go into there and beat 1. Nothing I need to do about that, and if I press play now you'll hear it loop round. Of course, when I press play and it loops round, it doesn't loop perfectly because the time's not right. So I'm not set the beats per minute in the samples to the same time as the loop. But that shouldn't worry us, we can work with that. So we are now going to go on to step 5, which is beat 2, and select the same sample and just change the sample start to 15. Okay, and then if we go to step 9, and change the sample start there to 30, and then go to step 13 and change the sample start there to 45, we should get something which approximates a little bit more. Of course, that's a little bit glitchy because the beat goes on all the way. So in order to work that out a little bit more, I am going to change the decay. So if you listen what happens when I change the decay. That pulls everything a lot more tight and you don't get stuff hanging over. But to be honest, I'd like to change the beat and make it a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to take that 5 out and I'm going to turn that into one of the ride sounds. So I'm going to put that at the moment. That's on 15, so I'm going to put it into 7, I think. And I'm going to put beat 7 onto 15. Okay. And then if we listen now, you should hear the difference. The other interesting thing you will note is that step 9 is not actually a kick, so I can change that and put a kick on there. So we'll fine tune it. And with this, I'm going to leave it playing. And I've put it on 60 because I know that's the start of the second bar. So let's do some more interesting. Let's fill in some of these other gaps here. So number 3, step 3. I could make that another hat, but I think I'm going to do it at a position where I think it's going to drop into a kick fairly quickly afterwards. So I'm going to probably make it around about 55 or 57. And then 11. Let's put something in there. I'm just going to I know there's some ghost notes on this. Just before that, the second kick, there's some ghost notes in there, so I've kind of put it a little bit before and then just and then 40, there seems to be a passing shot with a snare, so I put that in there. Now this is quite a reasonable beat as it stands, and even if I take the decay right down, that's not terrible. That's quite a nice. But this is where it starts to get interesting. So if I play with the chance parameter now, you miss out some beats. But of course that leaves empty gaps. So the way that you can fill in those gaps is turn the decay up. And then if you balance between the chance and the decay, you can make some quite interesting and complicated patterns. Of course, the more you do this and the more you open up the decay, the more the original pace of the drums comes through. Anyway, I hope you have found this interesting. If you have, and you've made it to the end and you're not a subscriber, you really should. If you found it useful and you think you know somebody else who might find it useful, please pass it on. And I hope to see you back again. So there we go, that's another one in the bag, and as they say at the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation, share and enjoy.